There it is.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight, or coming out, staying in tonight and joining us and our featured guest, Bob Jones. We're fortunate to have Bob because, as many of you know, two of the flagship events of the Eastern Federation this year got canceled, and those were both the Wild Acres sessions. And Bob was going to present back in May, and he's been going to Wild Acres for since the mid '80s. I think every couple years he gets roped into coming and giving a talk, but it's also one of the most well attended Wild Acres events.
Yeah, I
But
think if I had gone this year, it would have been my 10th visit.
okay, okay.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
damn shame that we can't do that anymore.
well,
Yeah.
there's
Never
always,
say never.
yeah.
The first year I went, um, the lady in charge told me that I had to be ready to give a lot of talks. So the first year I gave 9 talks. Um, you had to give a talk in the morning after breakfast and another talk after lunch. And then if they had any open nights when nobody showed up, then you had to give more talks. So that first year I gave 9 talks. That was fun.
Well, good, good.
What was really funny was that they forgot, the lady who was introducing me forgot my name. So she went on and on about this talk, and then she said, and here's a speaker. And so some of the girls in the group later went down to Asheville, and they got a T-shirt, and on the T-shirt they had the name A Speaker, and I had to wear that the rest of the week.
That's so good.
Nice. So I'm going to turn this over to the young gentleman who has had an article done on him just, I think the last month, it was June maybe. But anyway, if you go to our website, efmls.org, you'll see on the homepage there is a link to this article. So with that, Trent, I'd like to for you to introduce our presenter tonight, Bob Jones. And so whenever you're ready, go ahead and tell folks a little bit about Bob.
Okay. Okay. So Bob Jones is a one-of-a-kind legend in the mineral community for his knowledge and experience in collecting. Retired school teacher who has been writing magazine articles since 1960. He has served as senior editor for Rock and Gem since the 1990s. He holds many awards, including the Carnegie Mineralogical Award, which honors his contributions to mineralogical preservation. He has served on the Tucson Show Committee for 40 years. In 2003, the mineral Bob Jonesite was named in his honor. Bob Jonesite is a vanadium sulfate found at the North Mesa mine in Utah. I was fortunate to meet Bob Jones at the 2017 EFMLS convention in Bristol, Connecticut. He was kind to take time out and share several stories with me. He encouraged me to follow my fluorescent mineral collecting passion. And one last reminder to keep yourself muted, and without further ado, here's Bob Jones.
Thank you, Trent. And this is for everybody in the Federation. You never know what impact you're going to have on others. So keep it up. You know,
Great.
you know
Thanks,
what they say, teach one, share one.
Yep.
That's important.
It is important.
Yep.
And Bob, I just wanted to say something to all the participants tonight about the question and answer period after your talk. This presentation was a gift, if you will, for all of the EFMLS local society presidents who tuned in over the last 2 months in our President's Roundtable. They took their time to share with their fellow presidents from around the East Coast on how they're doing at this time. So What I'd like to ask for those folks who have questions for Bob is to type into the chat your questions, but before your questions, just put that you are a president, because I won't be able to find you all. It'll be easier just to see them on the chat, that you're a president, which society that you're affiliated with, and then your question. And also for the participants, if we have time to get to you after the presidents, just type into the chat participant, your society affiliation, and then your question. So without further ado, Bob, go ahead and first we'll need to take off this article, Christine. Perfect. And now we're going to allow Evan. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. My name's Evan Jones. I'm the son of this guy here, and I've been collecting minerals since I was extremely young.
5.
And I've been a mineral dealer full time since 1986. So you might have seen me at the Springfield show with my company, Unique Minerals. Or if you go to Tucson, I've been going to Tucson since about 1981. So nice
Great.
to see you all.
Thanks,
So Evan, I've shared the screen with you. So whenever you can click
Okay.
on, yep, there we go.
All right.
Well, I can tell you why I like Wulfenite as my favorite mineral. If you took a map of the Southwest and stuck a pin in Tucson, and then put a string on it and circle about a 100-mile radius line around Tucson, you would have encompassed at least 100 mines in which you can find collectible Wulfenite. And, you know, it includes mines like the Red Cloud mine, the Glove mine, the old Yuma mine, there's a whole bunch of them. And, you know, living here in the Southwest for well over 60 years, I got so I was collecting Wulfenites whenever I could, and I enjoyed it all. So if I were to ask you what the official mineral is for Arizona, you'd probably say copper. Well, that's not true. When Mineralogical Record was going to put out an issue on Arizona mining and minerals, they ended up doing several of them. And the first one, of course, had to have a Red Cloud Wulfenite on it, because that's really the Wulfenite from Arizona that everybody remembers. And most people think it's the best in the world. I beg to differ, but I'm in the minority. But in 1981, this issue came out. And that particular specimen was found by a man named Ed Over, and we'll talk about him a little later. Next. Because Wulfenite was my favorite mineral, of course, I've done articles on it in Rock, excuse me, in Rock and Gem, which happens to be the official magazine of the Federation. And it's been a lot of fun. I started writing for Rock and Gem in 1972, when Jim Miller, the owner, asked me if I could contribute articles. Prior to that, I wrote for Rocks and Minerals magazine beginning about 1960. And the reason I did that is because I had written to the editor, and he had written, and my question was, why don't you have a column on fluorescent minerals? Well, he wrote back and said, because you have not written it. So I did. I wrote fluorescent mineral articles for about 12 years altogether. So anyway, this is Rock and Gem, and Wulfenite's my favorite mineral. Next. If you were asked, what's the official mineral of Arizona? No doubt you would say copper. Well, copper happens to be the official metal of Arizona, but it's not the official mineral. We have an official gem, it's called petrified wood, as you probably know. But a few years ago, you can see the date there, in 2016, a couple of guys down in Tucson got together with guys from the Mineralogical Society up here in Phoenix, and they decided it was time to have an official mineral, Wulfenite. So they put together a bill that was submitted to the state legislature. And in order to be sure it passed, what we did was I bought 100 copies of a calendar that featured nothing but Wulfenite. And we had the young folks, the young collectors from the Mineral Society go to the legislature on the day that the bill was going to be considered. And they stood in the doorway, and as the legislators went into the chamber, the kids handed out the columns of the calendars of Wulfenite. Now, how could you lose? And this is the official specimen, actually, that was adopted. It happens to be in Evan's collection, but that's beside the point. You can see how beautiful some of these red cloud things are. Next slide. Speaking of Evan, you just met him. In 2005, Tucson chose a theme of Wulfenite for the show. They choose a theme every year. In this particular year, it was Wulfenite, so Evan put together this exhibit of mainly Arizona stuff. There's other things in there, but the big thing in the middle is a glove specimen. Over on the right, you can see a yellow Hilltop mine. And so this gives you an idea of the extent, how wonderful the Wulfenites from Arizona are. Let's go back to the red cloud. In the first real red cloud Wulfenites that showed up were back in the 1880s. And if you want to see some of those, you can actually go to the Harvard Mineralogical Museum, and you'll see the Wulfenites that came out back in about 1880 something. But in 1937, Ed Over went in there. Now, Ed was collecting partner of Art Montgomery. Arthur financed all the trips, and Ed was the mineralogist, and the two of them made a great team. On this particular trip, Ed was by himself. When he got to the mine was being operated by two contract miners who were mining silver. But he went in and he went down in, and he was very lucky. He hit a vein that was all beautiful red cloud Wulfenites, and they were not attached to matrix. They were all big singles and groups of singles that were attached to each other. And he collected a wonderful selection of these things. But he knew that when he left the mine, he would have to show what he dug to the contract miners. So he put all these nice crystals at the bottom of his boxes, and then he picked up all sorts of junk off the floor, just really terrible, broken, lousy, no good minerals. And so when he came out, of course, sure enough, the miners stopped him and wanted to see what he had. And of course, when they saw all the junk, they just laughed at him and sent him on his way. He shipped these to Art Montgomery, who was back east, and Arthur marketed and sold some of them, and he sold some of them to the Shortmans. They had a shop up in Massachusetts way back in the good old days. Next. Now, that find in 1937 is what triggered the locals to get very excited about red cloud. And so from then until recently, and that mine was being visited by people from all over the United States, Arizona in particular. And in the 1990s, a group of local guys got together and said, hey, we really need to do something at Red Cloud. So they brought in heavy equipment, and they actually dug a pit. They open pitted it, and they hit a vein that started producing things like this and this. And there's an outstanding example. That thing's about 10 inches across. That's a typical example of what they were mining in the 1990s. And of course, this just blew the lid off Red Cloud Wulfenites. Everybody wanted the Red Cloud. So you see these for sale still, not as good as this maybe, but plenty of Red Clouds hit the market after the 1990s. The next mine that we're going to talk about is closer to Tucson. As a matter of fact, the Old Yuma, if you stand on the dump of the Old Yuma, you can actually see into downtown Tucson. That's how close it is. It's an old gold mine, and there's some great stories about it. One of the local collectors, Dick Jones, who was a retired sheriff's deputy, collected there a lot. Dick always carried a gun when he went out in the desert for obvious reasons. You know, we have wild pigs, rattlesnakes, and other such. And he was sitting at the edge of the pit having lunch and looked across the pit, and he could see a yellow spot on the wall. So he pulled out his gun and shot it, and it broke into a pocket of crystals. So he dug them out, and he got himself some nice little Wulfenites. The other story about old Yuma is, I find it very interesting. It was owned by Dick Bedeau. Now, Dick Bedeau, for you Federation folks, was one of the first people to receive a grant from the Federation, from the Education Fund. He attended Harvard, and Dick owned this mine, and it was right next to the western section of the Saguaro National Monument. Now, the feds don't like mining going on anywhere near their properties, and so they wanted to buy the old Yuma, and they got in touch with Dick, and they started negotiating, and the negotiations didn't go very well. They pretty much stalled, and Dick decided he had to do something to move it along. So he drew up plans to install a cyanide mill on the property because it was an old gold mine. Well, of course, when he did that, then the feds got all shook up, and they agreed to his terms, and he sent me a copy of the check that he got from the feds. It was for $667,000, which was a pretty good deal for him. Next. One of the most favorite mines of the local collectors is the 79 mine up near Hayden. The 79 mine produced wonderful Wulfenites. It was so popular that so many collectors went in there and dug so much that they actually choked the incline and shaft with rubble. And so now the fellows who have it are cleaning the mine out, getting it ready so they can begin specimen mining again. And this is the kind of Wulfenite that came out of there. It's wonderful stuff. And another fellow by the name of Sam Rua got in there, and he had a pocket like this. And I heard about it, so I went on up there, and I got this, a nice miniature, beautiful, beautiful yellow Wulfenite windows, you might call it, panes, window panes. And it's in our collection now. And I'm not sure, but I think I paid about maybe 20, 25 bucks for that thing. And we did okay with it. And the mine also produced smithsonites, things like that. Now, this mine has history. One of the first guys to dig there was Ed Over, and he got some nice Wulfenites, hilltop mine. And later, in '38, Ed McDowell went to dig there. Now, Ed was he was a retired contract miner from Butte, Montana, and a real character. He was everybody loved him. Everybody thought he was a real kook. And I used to go to shows, and he'd be there, and he'd grab me by the arm and say, "Bob, come with me. I want to look at a special display." So we go over to the display, and he'd point at a specimen. He'd say, "What color is that?" And, I thought he was testing me. And so it's green. Oh, thank you. What color is that? Oh, that's blue. Well, thank you. What color is that? It's red. Okay, thank you. And I said, why are we doing this? He said, "Well, I'm colorblind, but I can see shades of gray, so I can associate different shades of gray with the colors of the actual specimens." Well, Ed was digging in there, and this is one of the pieces he got in '38. Unfortunately, while he was camping one night, the tunnel collapsed, and he never got back in there. So that was the end of the hilltop production. This mine, Mammoth St. Anthony mine, an old gold mine. It was discovered in the late 1800s, and it was called, the town was called Schultz. Now it's called Tiger, and we'll tell you why in a minute. This is what I call a signature specimen of Tiger. It's a mixture or a combination of dioptase, cerussite twins, and Wulfenite. And these came out in the 40s in considerable quantities, and quite a few of them around. But the mine is famous not for this as much as it is famous for its rare lead copper minerals like boleite, diabolite, leadhillite, phosgenite, things like that. And anyone who collects Tiger is eager to get a hold of specimens like that. The Wulfenite from there was in huge quantities. They were actually mining veins of solid crystallized Wulfenite like this during the World War I and World War II. And some of the locals told me when they were younger, they could get permission to go stand by the conveyor belt coming up out of the mine, bringing ore to the mill, and they could stand by the conveyor belt and cherry pick pieces of Wulfenite like this off the belt and trim them down, take the broken parts off, and get themselves a specimen. So that's Tiger. One of the two mines that probably made Arizona really noteworthy in the 50s was the Defiance mine along with the Glove mine. Now, this piece from the Defiance mine is typical of what came out. What happened on this was that George Bedeau in Tucson, who was involved in politics and owned about 5 local newspapers, small town newspapers, had a call from the mine operator on a Friday. And the guy said, well, we just blasted and we opened up a water course that is just jammed with Wulfenite. And if your son Richard wants to come and collect, he can do it over the weekend because we won't mine again until Monday. So Dick and got a hold of Dick Jones, and the two went down there, and they mined consistently and continuously over the weekend. They filled boxes with Wulfenite, and both of their cars were loaded, and Dick actually had to get a small U-Haul trailer to haul the rest of the Wulfenite out. Now, keep in mind that the flats that they collected were not these small white flats that we all use today. Back in those days, we used seat cover boxes, which are about twice the size of the normal white boxes we use today. So to get 5 or 10 or 15 or 50 flats like that was a lot of specimens. Now, with that many specimens available, when they sold them, they couldn't get very much money for each piece. And I picked up a specimen like this, probably 10 years after they were dug, and it cost me $5. Now, try and buy that today for a lot more, and we'll see what happens. The other mine that was made famous by Dick Bedeau is the Glove mine. Now that's pretty close to Tucson. It's only maybe 25 or 30 miles south of Tucson. What happened there was they were putting in an incline to go down below the ore body, or leave deeper in the ore body, and they broke into a big pocket, actually a small cave, that was lined completely with Wulfenite like this. And again, the mine owner gave George Bedeau a call and said, hey, we're shut down for the weekend. If Dick wants to come down and collect, have him down. So this time Dick Bedeau got a hold of Bob Haig, and they went down there and they mined, and they mined, and they mined, and they just filled a flat after flat after flat. They had hundreds of specimens. Now, I've been in a cave in the pocket where they got these things. Bill Panzer and I got in there, and we could sit in the middle of this opening, this cave, and the walls were probably 15 feet apart and about 15 or 20 feet deep, and the ceiling was at least 4 feet up. And two of us could sit in there and just marvel at what we had wished to see there. There was nothing left, of course. Those guys picked it clean. But the Glove produced some wonderful things. This is very typical of what came out of the Glove. And they had a problem on pricing. Now, in 1958, minerals weren't selling for huge numbers. And so they had to figure out a way to price these things. They could price them individually. Well, when you have 3 or 4 or 500 specimens, that'll take forever to get them priced. So they finally decided, no, we're not going to price them individually. We'll simply identify a size and put a price on that size. And then anything that was that size would be the same price. Well, they could do this because every single specimen was like this, marvelous specimen. And here's an example. That's the top part of that specimen, and that would have qualified as a 4x5 in that picture. And what did they charge? They decided $5 for a 4x5 Wulfenite. How would you like to buy that today? I don't think you could. Okay, next slide. Probably the most exciting and favorite mine of the collectors in the Phoenix area is the Raleigh, because it's only about 60 miles west off I-10. And we used to go there on a Saturday and you know, collect and have a wonderful time. And the deal was that when you went in there, this is Evan looking up the Wulfenite vein. The deal was that when you went, you didn't have to worry about finding something. Your only concern was to decide which of the veins in the ceiling that was full of Wulfenite would be the vein you would work. And, you know, the guys with you would pick their own vein, and we would each work and get specimens. Bill Taser and I were in there on one weekend, and we got 4 or 5 flats of nice stuff. And instead of having to carry that stuff out up the incline to the surface, Bill and I carried the stuff over to the bottom of the shaft. And then I went up outside and I dropped the rope down, and he tied on to the flats. And I started hauling the flats up. Well, I didn't know that there was a great horned owl living in the shaft. And when that guy came out, he looked like he had a wingspan of 50 feet. I mean, it just scared the living daylights out of me. But I did not let go of the rope. I got the boxes up okay. So let's take a look at Evan coming out of there with the rock. It's not a good picture because you can't see Wulfenite, you know, but that's typical of what you had to do to get specimens, because the barite was very hard, and so you had to break out chunks of the wall to get a specimen and then take it home and trim it down later. And this is what your goal was, to try and collect specimens like this. The mine itself is closed now. It's under sort of a collector contract, and you have to be invited to come in and do some collecting. We've done it a couple of times. Evan's been in more than I have. And, we're always successful, but it's just a matter now of getting an invitation. It's beautiful stuff, a nice orange Wulfenite with mimetite. On one of the trips down there years ago, was lunchtime, and there were 4 of us in there, and we took a break, and I sat down on a rock on one side of the stove to have lunch. And the guy sitting across from me said, "Hey, Bob, I don't think you ought to sit on that rock." Said, "Well, why not?" He said, "Well, look underneath. It's got a stick of dynamite under it." Well, sure enough, there was an old stick of dynamite, still bleeding a little bit. So we decided we'd go collect somewhere else the rest of that day. So now, Evan and a partner were in there on one weekend trip, and they found this pocket in the wall, beautiful pocket of Wulfenite and mimetite. And so they worked for about 18 hours to pry out a whole section of wall. The piece they took out of the wall weighed about 55 pounds, and they had to take it up to a Collector's Edge in Golden, Colorado, and Collector's Edge. Reduce the volume of the thing to this. It's real beautiful. That's about 5 inches across. It's really a winner. Yeah. Of course, if you go south of Tucson into Mexico, you also run into mines that produce Wulfenite. This is a famous one, Mapami, Mina Abuela. That's, of course, it's probably better known now for Lagrandites. For instance, the Aztec Sun Lagrandite came out of Mapami, out of Mina Abuela. You can't really tell which mine down there, and there are 5 or 6 of them, which mine produced, because everything came out of the Mina Abuela shaft, so it all got named that. But the big Lagrandite that everybody remembers, of course, is the Aztec Sun, which it so happens I named it and wrote it up in Rock and Gem. It is now in the Men's Museum over in Lebanon. Another mine that's in Mexico that is very well known and produced an awful lot of Wulfenite is the Eruption Mine. A friend of ours, Benny Fenn, went in there. And what happens in these mines is the water level raises and lowers, depending on the rainy seasons. And the Eruption Mine had, the water level was pretty high most of the time, but one year it was very dry and the water level dropped. So Benny got in there where the Wulfenite was, and he collected. And I mean, he really collected. He had flats and flats full of stuff like this. And he called me and said he was going to be at Tucson and come on down. I was going to go anyway, of course. But I didn't get down there until Friday late because I was still teaching school. And when I got to Benny's, I went through his stuff, and he had flats of stuff like this, just marvelous. Now, if you look at these, you notice they look like sandwiches. They have the dark interior line where it almost looks like a sandwich with meat in it. They're pseudo-cubic, of course, very sturdy. That's the one good thing about Wulfenite. They're very sturdy. Anyway, I got to Benny's room at the hotel, and I went through all his stuff. He must have had 75 or 80 flats. And again, we're talking about seat cover boxes. And there was a lot of great stuff like this, but there wasn't one miniature that I really wanted. But I bought a couple of flats to trade. And, I don't know what I paid for them. Maybe, again, I don't know, 30 bucks a piece or something. Anyway, I said something to Benny about, Benny, I just didn't find the one piece. You know what that's like. You're looking through stuff, and you just don't see the one that really catches your eye. And that's what I was looking for. So he said, well, look, he said, I got one at home. I'll send it to you. Maybe it's what you'll like. So after the show, a couple of weeks, a box came in the mail, and this is what was in the box. And when I opened the box, I said to my wife, I said, I don't care what he wants for this thing. I want to buy it. And there was no price. And about maybe 3 or 4 days later, he came a little note with the question, Bob, is $40 too much? So being a kind-hearted person, I added the postage that he had spent to send it to me and sent him a check for 46 bucks.
What did we sell that for?
Do you really want me to say?
Well,
try, I don't know, it was 300 and
it was 6 figures.
yeah, 6 figures. No, there's another shot of it here on the backside. But I entered this in the 2 Cent Show when you're in Wulfenite year, as a matter of fact, and it took Best in Show miniature at 2 Cent. We don't have it anymore. Again, you just heard Evans say we sold it, and of course you can almost buy a house for what we got for it. Well, not quite, but you get the idea. Okay, now we're gonna start an argument, or at least a discussion. I think the most beautiful Wulfenites in the world came from this mountain, the San Francisco Mountain, San Francisco Mine in Cacarpe, which is of course an abandoned town now, down in Sonora. And the arrangement was, I was on the board of the Sonora Desert Museum, and Bill Panster was the curator, and Susie Davis was paying a miner in this old gold mine to dig Wulfenite. So we made an arrangement with Susie. Have your man call us when he hits a pocket, and we'll go down and we'll photograph it in place. Then we'll dig it out and take it up to the museum, because they were building a new earth science wing called Steve Condon Mineral Department. And they were putting in a tunnel, a mine tunnel, in which they had a vanadinite pocket, a malachite pocket. They even had a small selenite cave as part of it. And Bill wanted to have a Wulfenite pocket. So one day we're all at the museum for a different reason, and the phone rings, and it's Susie Davis, and she tells Bill that we have a call from Jose, and he should hit a pocket, and we'll come down and meet him tomorrow morning at sunrise. Now we're talking about Sonora, and we're in Tucson, and we had to go back up to Phoenix because Jeff Kurtzman was with us. He's the photographer, and he had to go up and get his cameras and stuff. I had to go up and get Evan and papers for crossing the border. And so we piled in the car in Scottsdale and drove like hell to get down there. Well, coming down I-10, I ended up being stopped by a state cop for doing 90 miles an hour. And luckily, in talking to the cop, I said, we work for the same outfit as you do. I said, I'm a writer for Arizona Highways Magazine. And Jeff Kurtzman, up there in the front seat, is a photographer for Arizona Highways Magazine. And the cop looked at me and said, Kurtzman, he said, does he have a brother on the police force? I said, yeah, I know he's got a brother, but I'm not sure. And the cop handed me back my license and registration. He said, now you boys take it easy. You can go ahead. And I didn't get a ticket. So we ended up down at sunrise. We met Jose. Here we are at the mine. And he swore, boy, we got a good pocket. This is gonna be great. And that's Bill Panster on the right. So the three of us with Evan, of course, marched in with Jose, took us into a big stope, and when we got in the stope, you could see across the aisle or across the stope a big seam, and you could tell that it had crystals in it. And this is what we could see from across the way. And so we walked up closer to it. We took a real good look, but this turned out not to be what we wanted for the museum because the crystals are sort of a yellow brown. They were not the really spectacular things we had seen from that mine. Of course, there was plenty of it because the seam ran from where we were standing. It went up the chute at least 10 or 15 feet or longer. Now, anyway, we decided against it, but Evan had to get in there and do a little digging, of course. And he was successful, of course, and got a little specimen like this. So you can see that it's Wulfenite, and it's not bad, but it is not the kind that you would want to put on display in a museum. Well, let me show you what did come out of that mine that would be a display in any museum. Is that outrageous or is that outrageous? Yeah, that's a small cabinet specimen, probably 4 by 4, 4 by 5, 6 inches, you think? Okay. And crystals are approaching an inch on an edge. But notice that the mimetite, little mimetite balls are in the Wulfenite crystals, which shows that you had a simultaneous crystallization of two different minerals coming out of the same solution at the same time under the same conditions, and the one being trapped inside the other. It's just wonderful stuff, and the color is just outrageous. Next one. Here's several more examples of this. That's a nice crystal on the end of the specimen. And notice all the little spherules of red mimetite floating in the Wulfenite. Now the biggest Wulfenite crystal from there was 5 inches on an edge. It was just a big single crystal. And we had it at the museum, and someone wanted to see it up close. And Bill picked it up and carefully put it in the hands of the viewer. And the guy looked at it, and the heat of his hand caused the crystals to shatter. So you gotta be careful handling on some of these things. Specimens, crystals do have stresses in them, and that big 5-incher was destroyed because of somebody's hand. Another example, this was about 4 inches from the base of the crystal up, and again, you notice the beautiful mimetite association with it. And here's the same specimen in a different view. And again, you're looking at a 6 by 5, something like that. Now, I honestly don't know what this stuff sold for, but I had stopped at Sue Davis's shortly after these were found, and she had a flat, and this was one of the small white box flats. She had a flat of miniatures of these, and she wanted my opinion. She said, I've offered this to Rukin Joe. Rukin was he was sort of the angel of the Snoredesant Museum collection. And she said, I've offered this to Rukin. And the box had about 15 miniatures in it that were just like this, just really killers. And I said, well, she said, is $500 too much to charge for the flat? I said, if he won't buy it, I will. But he did. So that was my last chance to get a good Wulfenite from there. Well, now, I've got one more Wulfenite I want to show you. We're going to give you a little test. Where do you think this is from? I'll give you a minute to think about that. Now that you've seen a lot of Arizona Wulfenites and a couple of Mexican Wulfenites, where do you think that's from? Well, let me tell you where I got the picture, where I took the picture, and maybe that'll give you a clue. I was invited to be a speaker at the first International Gem Mineral Symposium in Beijing, China. So I went over, I flew over, of course, with Carol, and it was set up like the UN. Everybody had headphones, they had translators, and I got up and gave a talk. They wanted to know the history of the Tucson show, because they wanted to start shows of their own like that. So I gave my talk, and then during the break time, I happened to see an old guy across the hall with this specimen. I could tell it was Wulfenite from where I was, so I ran over real quick and inquired. Of course, he was Chinese, so I couldn't find out anything, but there were people there who were able to help me. I found out that this old guy owned the mine where this came from, and he had actually dug this specimen himself and had come to the conference just so he could get people interested in his minerals. So I took the specimen home. Of course, he told me where it was from. He took the specimen. I took the photograph home and I showed it to Evan, and he and Marcus Auriglieri decided they needed to track these things down. It turned out it was a Chinese specimen, of course. And so Evan and Marcus headed to China, and they tracked down a dealer who had these, and they were able to get a bunch of flats of really nice things that had come out of the western province of China. And the mine produced quite a bit for a while, and then it kind of tapered off to nothing. So, well, there you are. That gives you an idea of Arizona Wulfenite and how Arizona got its official Wulfenite name. And I guess we'll turn this back over to Trent and David, and you guys go from there.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the talk. It was really close to being on time, which I wasn't expecting that. But I hope everyone got some good information. Now, I haven't seen too many folks populating the chat with questions.
You know, when I give a talk, I never use notes. So I just wing it, and I use the photographs to, you know, give me reasons to describe them. And so, you know, if there's information I left out, maybe I can help.
Sure. No, I know what you mean about winging it. I've been doing that ever since I was president of the Eastern Federation.
Well, you know, the thing that bothers me about listening to talks is when the person who's giving the talk flashes up on the screen a picture of a mineral, and under the mineral is 2 paragraphs of description. And then they stand there and read the paragraphs to you like you're so dumb you can't read your own stuff. And I just hate that. So that's why I have purposely avoided having a lot of printing on my pictures.
Yep, I know what you mean. So we did have the first question. I don't know if how technical it is, but is Wulfenite a good name for a dog? And then when you call the dog, do you say woof woof? I don't know.
How am I supposed to answer that?
Yes.
I wouldn't call my girlfriend Wolf or Wulfenite. But the dog, they don't know what you're saying anyway.
All right.
The dog better be orange or yellow, though.
That would be fitting. So we have Steve Howell. I believe he's in a Burlington. Yeah, Burlington Gem Mineral Club. Bob, are you familiar with the Wulfenite from the Tusit mine in Buja, Morocco?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, very nice yellow crystals. Some of the stuff from over there is associated with barite. Nice, you know, good matrix specimens. You know, speaking of New Hampshire, I never collected Wulfenite there, but I used to collect the smoky quartzes up on Moat Mountain, places like that. And I did go to Loudville in Massachusetts, which was an old lead mine, and did collect Wulfenites there, which I think you almost needed a glass to see them. They were so tiny, but it was fun.
Yep, I've been there too. We've got a couple folks from the Connecticut Valley Mineral Club who are real close to that spot.
Yeah, I joined the New Haven Mineral Club in 1946, I think it was, maybe 47. And they were kind enough to make me a life member. I think I'm a life member at about, oh gosh, I don't know, 5, 6 clubs, San Diego, or locally here, Tucson, Phoenix, but doesn't matter.
Okay. Bill Stevens writes, Bill, do you want to ask Bob? You can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask Bob your question.
Silence is golden. Bill, what's your question?
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and ask that question. What direction and how far from Cucurpe Village is the San Francisco mine?
You go east. Yeah, it's a small. Well, you're talking about from the town of Cucurpe, which is just a bunch of old adobe bricks now. I mean, it's right there. It's the little town is right at the foot of the mountain. You have to go from, what's the name of the big city where we went?
Magdalena.
Magdalena. Yeah, we gassed up in Magdalena, and then we had to go east. Oh, I don't know.
Follow the road down through El Yeso and down through La Lamina Ranch. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the road in was terrible.
Yeah, I got stuck a few times. Yeah, I heard about the San Francisco mine, but I think it was outside of my field area, and I never really figured out where it was in relation to the Rio San Miguel and the town of Cucurpe. I stayed in the town of Cucurpe.
Really?
This was 1984. I
I
spent
didn't know
3 months.
you're not that old, are you?
I'm 60, so it's old enough.
Just a kid.
Oh, thank you. God bless you. You're on my Christmas list.
Give me 10 days and I'll be 94. How's that?
Wow.
Good Lord. Wow.
Wow. All right. Thanks, Bill. So,
I will be.
Sarah, do you see any questions?
I know that in Baltimore is a young fellow named Alex who,
Oh, yeah, I saw him.
yeah, Alex is supposed to be tuned in.
Yeah, I think I saw him.
Yeah, Bernie's the guy who teaches cabs at Wild Acres, and his wife Lynn. Great couple. You know what my plan this year was? To fly to Baltimore, since I don't drive. My family ganged up on me and told me I couldn't drive anymore. And so my plan was to fly into Baltimore and then ride down to Wild Acres with Bernie and Lynn. And that was the part I was looking forward to the most. And we didn't do it. But anyway, Alex is with them, as I understand it. And incidentally, Alex was just graduated from high school, I believe, and he got an award in cum laude in high school, which that's pretty good honor. Good
Yeah.
stuff.
We do have a question from David. Not you, David, other David. It says, can you please talk about Stevenson Bennett?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Stevenson Bennett is just north of Las Cruces in the Oregon Pipe Mountains in New Mexico. And you go by there and you keep going east, and you'll end up in the White Sands and the atomic bomb area and all that good stuff. But Stevenson Bennett produced wonderful orange Wulfenites years ago. And along with those, and the best one that I've seen are in New Mexico Tech in Socorro. And along with the Stevenson Bennett Wulfenites, they were finding 7-inch long twin sites, just real killers. And they rival what came out of Sumed for size. Just wonderful things. So that I've never collected there, unfortunately. I was going to try and do it with Benny Fenn because he and his wife lived down in Las Cruces, but we never managed to figure that one out. We never got there. You know, some of the reddest Wulfenites I ever found came out of Turkey. I've seen them, but I never owned them.
Iran.
Iran, yeah. So the original Wulfenites, of course, were found in Europe, and they kind of looked like the Los Almenos things, a different color. They were more orange, more yellow, but they looked a little bit like they'd been acid etched or something. The edges were kind of rough, but the same sandwich type of crystal. Very nice.
So I do see Alex.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I just unmuted Alex. So Alex, if you like to ask a question for Bob.
He's figuring out his audio right now.
Okay.
I assume where Bernie and Lynn are there with him.
Well,
He was going to be at their house. There they are, right there.
Yeah, I got my mic working now.
No, I
There we
got to
go.
put my glasses on. Oh yeah. Hey Bernie. Hey Lynn. How's the surfing? You're not surfing. Okay. They're muted.
I'll unmute them as well. There we go.
Actually, surfing was very good, and the invitation to go to Wild Acres with us stands forever.
Well, thank you. If they'll ever have it again, I'll go.
Amen.
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 Yeah. You know, one of the things I always liked about Wild Acres, aside from the rock hunters, of course, was the chef in the mess hall always tried to make an effort to get local produce, so that the meals were, you know, a little cut above the normal that you would get in a mess hall. And I always enjoyed that. That's good stuff.
Alex, did you want to ask Bob a question? Actually, he's at his place since David did it this way.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Alex. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So where are you headed? Where are you going to go to college?
Yeah, University of Maryland.
Oh, well, I won't hold that against you.
So I have a quick question. That one specimen you showed, I find it a little bit hard to gauge the size of the plates once they become a bit like how you described sandwich-like. So what was the
you mean
size of some of those larger plates, those larger crystals?
the Los Almenos specimens? They were about an inch on an edge, usually a little more maybe. They kind of, you know, when you buy candy in the store, the caramel candies that are wrapped in paper.
And I say it looked like caramel.
The square brown thing. Well, that's kind of what they look like. And about, you know, they ran anywhere from a half inch up to an inch, a little more maybe. On our specimen, they were big. Yeah, they were inch and a half, inch and 3/4. That was pretty spectacular.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, Ben brought an awful lot of stuff out of Mexico. You know, Carol and I went into Mexico with him and Elva on one trip, and they had literally discovered a gem mine. Benny did a fellow a lot of favor, a fellow who was in the legislature in Mexico, and the guy said, "Well, what can I do to help you?" And Benny said, "Well, can you get me the fur export license for Mexico for a year?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I think I can," because Benny had a big ranch and all, you know. So Benny set out traps, and one of the traps caught a coyote, but the coyote broke the anchor loose, and so the coyote was dragging the anchor across the desert, and Benny and Elva on their quads were checking the trap line, and they followed the trail of the coyote to where he died. And while Benny was taking the dead coyote out of the trap, Elva was bending over and picking up 1 and 2 inch crystals of gem yellow labradorite, and they found this lava seam that was just disgorging these things. They literally shipped trailer loads of yellow labradorite from that mine to Southeast Asia for cutting. And when Carol and I went in there, he handed each of us a big plastic bag, you know, one of those 1 gallon plastic bags. He said, "Here, help yourself." And within an hour, we had filled our bags with gem labradorites. And I took some of them to Wild Acres because, who the heck was the guy that, Reuben Selesnik was the facilitator there. So I gave Reuben several of them so he could facet them with the kids, with the customers, with, you know, with the collectors there at Wild Acres. And I didn't keep a lot of the stuff I collected. I gave it all away. That's how you encourage people to get involved. And so good stuff.
Evan just.
Yeah. Let me tell you about this kid. You know, when he started collecting, when I would come home from a field trip, when I would win my workshop and trim specimens, and I would dump the trimmings out in the alley. And when he was 5 years old, I found out he was going out in the alley collecting rocks. So I guess that's where he got his start.
Well, we have a lot of thank yous, Bob. We're trying to look through the questions here. There's one, so from Alana Stone from the New York Mineralogical Club. She asked, my question is, what has been the most challenging mine to get specimens from for you?
To get specimens from? Just the emerald mines. I went in 6 different emerald mines down in Colombia, and I was escorted by a mine superintendent in the Tequendama mine. And to get in the mine, you had to climb down a ladder, you know, a couple of levels, and step off the ladder, and you're up to your knees in mucky, slimy, black water. And those people didn't remove any more rock than they had to make tunnels. And so when you had to go out to the face where the outside veins were, you had to stoop over. And I stooped over for 1,500 meters in a tunnel. And I'll tell you, I had muscles in my legs I didn't know I even owned. And it was really tough. But I got out there, and they were mining. And of course, we weren't allowed to collect anything. But the superintendent on the way out took me into a side tunnel, which was caged or fenced off. And there was a vein in which you could actually see emeralds. And so, of course, I moved toward the vein to get one. And of course, he blocked me. But then he pulled out a rock hammer and he chopped a few of them out of the calcite. When we got out of the surface, he held them out in his hand. And I looked at him. I said, "What do you think those are worth?" He said, "Oh, 50,000." So, as far as challenges in actual collecting, boy, that would be a tough one. I guess collecting fluorescent Wernerite up in Canada. Another guy and I went up about 100 miles north of Montreal to collect at night with a fluorescent lamp. The stuff was all over the place. There was nothing tough about collecting it. The problem was we made a stupid mistake and went up there during the black fly season. If you have ever gotten into black flies, you would remember it because they're with you the rest of the day, the rest of the summer. I had sores on my body that I didn't even know I had until I got home. It was really something. But we had a truckload of nice yellow fluorescing minerals. And when we were driving back, it was probably 4 o'clock in the morning, driving back down toward Montreal. I got stopped by a Canadian police officer. And I wasn't speeding. And I said, well, I asked him, I said, why did you stop me? He said, well, what do you got in the trunk? I said, rocks. And of course, yeah, sure. What's your name? Bob Jones. Oh, yeah, sure. And so he made me open the trunk, and I got out the light and the lamp, and I showed him. And I said, what did you think I had in here? He said, oh, we thought you were a couple of thieves that had stolen a safe somewhere, and we're taking it home. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So, Bob, we've got I think someone who's new to collecting and minerals. We have Jian Zhao. Jian, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, or ask you to unmute, so you can ask your question.
Yeah, hi, this is Jen Xiao from New York. Yes, I'm very new to the collection. I found that is fascinating, but what kind of advice you suggest me to, how do I even start?
Can you say that again, please? My hearing is not great.
Oh, so
Yeah.
what advice do you would suggest me? How do I start the collections?
I'll start collecting. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, you need a good book. Fred Poe's Field Guide. Now, Fred used to be the curator there at the New York Museum of Natural History, so I'm sure you can probably get one there in the bookshop. That's a great book for collecting. Another really good one is Johnson Kankas's book on mineralogy for amateurs. It's readable, it's understandable, and I use those two books even now all the time. They're great. As far as collecting goes, besides doing a lot of reading, go to museums, talk to curators, and go to dealers, talk to the dealers. Try and build an interest in one area. Don't try and collect everything from everywhere. I started out with fluorescent minerals, and I stuck with it for several years, and then I realized, gee, there's more to this mineral world than fluorescence. So then I sold that collection, and I started collecting worldwide. Well, when I did that, I ran out of money the first day, and you just can't have it. So once you start looking at minerals, choose one or two that you really like calcite or quartz or Wulfenite or whatever, and start with that and build your collection around a relatively narrow field. And then as you read and as you go to shows and learn more and talk to more people, then you can begin to expand your interests and broaden your collecting interests. But the way prices are today with minerals, it's very difficult to collect everything. You really have to narrow your field to what you are most interested in, what you understand quicker, and start that way. And then you can go from there as you get more and more experience. Join a club. Be sure to join a club, because if you join a club, then you've got other people who are educated, who are learned, and they know where to go collect, and they can help you a lot. That's what I did. I joined the New Haven Club, and then from there, when I moved out here, I joined the Mineralogical Society and the Tucson Club. And it's been wonderful. This is the greatest hobby in the world. What hobby? Tell me, what hobby is there besides mineral collecting where the entire family can be involved from the youngest age right on up to the oldest? Because in field collecting, everybody can go and collect. In reading and in studying and in going to shows and in going to museums, there isn't anybody in the family who doesn't want to be a part of that. So mineral collecting can make a family, can bring a family together and really make it worthwhile. Incidentally, I mentioned Marcus Riglieri going to China with Evan. Marcus is another one of the winners of the recipients, I should say, of the scholarship fund. I was the honoree. I guess it was for California. I'm not sure, but anyway, he's one of the people I gave the money to, and he ended up getting his doctorate degree at the U of A. So support the education fund, support the hobby, support your club, and you'll find it to be very rewarding.
Thank you so much. I'm actually want to incorporate the journey to my international travel. So next year I will be traveling to Spain and Portugal and possibly Japan. So how do we, so I want to hitting two birds with one stone. When I travel, how do I connect with those local people, club? What would be the shortcut for doing that?
Years ago, they did a book called Mineral Museums of the World, and it was a paperback, and that would give you some places to go. And no matter where you go, you can track down you can track down a dealer. They advertise everywhere, and dealers are very gracious. They're very helpful for young people and for beginners. They can put you onto clubs or tell you where the museums are, and of course they can show you what they've got and sort of introduce you to what's available in a specific area like Spain or Portugal. I've got a friend, Victor Young. He was a dealer, but when he was a teenager, his father was sent to Spain to negotiate with Franco on American basins. And Vic was a rock hound. He began collecting over there in Spain, and he's the one who brought out the Dolomites and the Aragonites. And he ended up, because his mother got to know some of the American artists and actors over there, he actually got in about 7 different movies like Patton as an extra. But you know, Spain is quite a place. A lot of people are interested in minerals. Jordi Fabre.
Yeah, she needs to contact Jordi.
Yeah, Jordi Fabre, Fabre, Jordi, Jordi, Jordi. Yeah,
Fabre Minerals.
Yeah, he's on the internet.
He's in Spain.
Yeah, and he's very gracious, a wonderful guy. He will take you where you need to go and help you as much as he can.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for your questions, Jan. Yep. Before I got a couple more questions here, but before we do, I just wanted to announce, Bob, that on Monday night we had a board of directors meeting, and one of the proposals was to start a scholarship at Wild Acres in the name of Bob Jones. So,
really?
yeah.
Everybody I know. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I feel like I'm part of that place. I've been there so much.
Yep. Well, we thought it was fitting as well, and we'll work out the specifics of the scholarship, but we've got the green light, and
good.
yeah.
So is it set up to receive donations, or when it is? Let me know. I would like to donate.
Yeah,
I
that's kind of the idea I had in mind, because we also had another scholarship approved, and we'll eventually get to Carolyn's, but we got the one for Merrill Dickinson, and his family is all excited, and they're ready to donate. So it's good stuff all around.
So the money that is donated is going to be used to help defray costs of students who go there.
Exactly.
Is that the idea?
We want to open these scholarships up to our affiliate societies to generate the interest to get people to go there, because you know, it's one of those places that until you go and experience it, you don't really know what it's about, but when you do experience it, everybody raves about it. So we've got. I was going
to say, to go once just to experience fun night.
Okay. Diane Beckman had a question. Let's see here. Can Sarah Christine? Can you find Diane? I think I saw her.
Yep. What was the pink matrix on the $40 specimen?
Bob?
Oh, that was the last kind of Wulfenite. Calcite.
Yeah, it's an onyx calcite and brown disclosite, which was fairly common with the Wulfenite there. Yeah. Okay.
Great. Yeah. Sarah, I'm briefly looking through the questions. I think we've got most of them.
I think we got them all.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is perfect. Hopefully it's was good for you, Bob. You know, we had a time. I did want to also mention I thought I saw Dan Cohen. I'd like to end this with Dan, if I could. If Dan wants to say something, go ahead, Dan.
Bob, my wife and I have been lucky enough to see you present 3 times at Wild Acres and also at Springfield. So I was talking to David earlier this year, and we were talking about the likelihood that Zoom presentations would be of interest to the EFMLS community, and he said, what can we do to make them as desirable as possible? And I said, get Bob Jones to present. So
I'll tell you what, if you'd like me to do this again sometime in the convenient future, the talk that I enjoy the most, and I think you would too, is my talk called Around the World in 80 Years. I've spent 80 years traveling around the world, and I've had a few adventures I could share with you.
well, I think my favorite Bob Jones lecture was the one where you talked about swinging on the ropes in the Sweet Home Mine.
Yeah, when I went in the Sweet Home Mine, to get up where the veins were, sometimes they had ladders, sometimes not. And one spot I had to run up a chat pile to the top and grab a rope and climb up to where the vein was to get my picture. Another one, I had to climb up a ladder, and Carol did this too. The ladder must have been about a 30-foot ladder to get up to the vein. But the ladder ended at the ledge. There was and the ceiling of the tunnel curved over your head, so there was no place to grab onto to get off the ladder. And the shelf or ledge that it leaned against was no more than 6 or 8 inches wide, and it had an air hose on it, so it was really a trick. And we made it. We got up there, and I got pictures of the road-across-side in place. And after we climbed down off the ladder, Brian Lees, who owns the mine, who was our host, turned to Carol and he said, well, good for you, Carol, because the last time I went up that ladder, I fell off. She could have killed him.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, listen, everyone, Bob, especially, thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. Evan, man, we don't know what we would have done without you.
Thank you.
I should think. Happy to help.
Great.
I'm going to thank Evan. He's going to buy me dinner tonight.
All right. Well, make sure you stay safe. You know,
Okay.
and that goes for everyone out there. So again, Bob.
Good hunting, Wisconsin. Good hunting.
Thank you. Appreciate that. You all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
There you are.